in the hearts of our towns and cities, they are almost invisible in plain sight. Hooked on drugs.
All I could remember was sliding down the wall.
Clinging precariously to life.
She wasn't breathing on that, and that's when it clicked on. She's died. She's ODing.
They are slipping in record numbers into lonely, undignified deaths.
People don't understand how hard it is to take a 7-year-old's hand and follow your mother's coffin.
This is Dundee, where drugs deaths are on a scale greater than anywhere in the UK.
How easy would it be to get enough drugs to kill you in this city centre?
10 minutes and I'd be able to get enough, well enough to kill myself and 3 people over. It's that easy.
Andy and Cheryl are heroin addicts, prescribed methadone to control their addiction. They sit on Dundee's High Street, and the drugs come to them. We've barely been filming an hour in this spot when our camera picks up an approach.
There's just that much going around.
We've been offered 2 bags for £5 and everything, knocked it back again.
What's this, heroin?
Yeah.
Survival for Cheryl and Andy has come by chance. 9 months ago, one evening on heroin and Valium was almost their last.
Next thing, I woke up in my bed and I had a strap on me. And I says, where did I get that from? I've been in the hospital. And they went, you OD'd yesterday twice. And I got out the hospital and me, like an idiot, he told us you only took half of it. So I went, where's my other half again? Took the other half, and exactly the same thing happened again.
So you OD'd on half of it, and then when you came to, you took the other half and OD'd again.
Yeah.
Well, did you know that it was always a risk?
I just didn't care at that point in my life.
You sort of knew there was a risk, but you just didn't think it would really happen to you. You did really think that it wouldn't have happened
but I'm
to you,
saying I
didn't
didn't care.
The drugs problem here would be chilling if things simply got no worse. Already in Dundee, the death rate from drugs is almost twice as high as in Scotland on average, and Scotland has the highest drugs death rate in the whole of the EU. But this year, the numbers are frightening. We've learned that in January, there were 12 suspected drugs deaths in Dundee last month alone.
Susan Kennedy, mother of 3, died on January the 17th. Samantha Fern, mum to Ellie, died on November 23rd. In Dundee, grandmothers are burying their daughters and raising their grandchildren as their own.
I tell Ellie the good things about her mum, how her mum was good and loved her.
Liz Johnston has endured the sneers that come with being an addict's mum.
I remember when one woman said to me, if I had my way, I'd shoot them all. And I just went, well, you'll not be shooting my daughter.
For over 20 years, she supported Samantha after a childhood trauma from which she never recovered.
How do you feel about the people who put those drugs in your hands?
They don't care that they're killing people. They don't care. That doesn't matter to them. All they're interested in is their money. And Samantha died for maybe £10. So that's what her life was worth. £10 to a dealer.
You just look at that photograph. What do you feel when you see it?
I feel so sad. She was just lovely, she was stunning.
Across the city, Kate has invited us to the flat where her daughter Susan lived. We sit 2 doors from the bedroom where less than a month ago her body was found.
Did it feel like almost that once she began to take drugs all those years ago that there was no escape?
Definitely. That's a definite. There was no escape. There was nothing you could do to stop her. I tried loads, there was not a thing you could do to stop her. She just kept doing it and doing it and doing it.
Susan was mum to 3 children, the youngest just 10 years old.
Do you think that Susan was ever exploited?
Yeah, Susan, she got put on the game and that, eh?
She got put on the game
Yeah. But that person would deny it.
by a dealer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's it like living with that as a
Horrible.
mother?
Disgusting.
How many deaths do you think it will take before something starts to change in Dundee?
Well, I think it'll take a lot more because there doesn't seem to be anything getting done.
Drugs deaths in Scotland are 2.5 times the UK average and 8 times the EU average. In Dundee, the trend is unwelcome and not understood. This is a city yearning to reinvent itself. Where the demise of industry has been brutal, male life expectancy is among the lowest in the UK.
You're starved.
I know, I'm a hero.
What we do know is that when users die here, they've normally taken more than one drug, commonly heroin and Valium type substances.
Most of the guys that we've come in contact with over the last few years, probably 3 out of 5 of them have died in the last couple of years.
Seriously?
Yeah. How many sugars?
Dundee's dealers are pushing increasingly lethal combinations, which is killing the men and women at the soup kitchen where nurse Kirsty volunteers.
Why is this happening? Why are so many people dying here?
Honestly, I don't know. Drugs are so easily available. Valium at the moment is horrendous. Street Valium is not Valium. So what the guys are actually taking is not really like pure drugs.
So what will it take to bring these numbers down, to stop people dying here?
I think there needs to be more openness around it and more honesty. There's so much stigma around drug use, and calling them junkies and labelling them different things and looking down on people, they're human beings. It could be any one of us.
On the high street, Cheryl and Andy have begged enough today for a hot meal. Now they're looking to get out of the cold.
No, you're not getting that in Cheryl. We've tried that in before.
What are you doing, just seeing if they've left the door open?
Yeah.
They say they're off heroin, but they're not entirely clean. With a strain of addiction, worry over housing, they're in a fragile state.
I was just checking to stick it right out the day the other one. I've got this. On you go.
Yes.
Cheryl, this will be perfect. This will be perfect.
But the euphoria of a warm place to shelter is short-lived.
Do you just repeat this again tomorrow? Does the same thing happen again?
Yeah.
Day after day after day.
Yep. Never ending.
Feels just hopeless, do you know what I mean? Feels like I'm never going to get anywhere. This is life, I don't want to be here.
Cheryl, Susan and Samantha. In Dundee, they wonder simply what might have been.
She had so much love for that little girl, it was unbelievable. She could have been such a good mum.
So how do you tell a 7-year-old that their mother has passed away?
Well, apparently you just have to say it, because children are quite versatile. And I just said, no, I can't.
Yeah, what an awful thing for you to have to do.
Yeah. I just said, Mummy's dead. And you never want to hear that scream again, I'll tell you. It was horrific. And she just broke her heart. And then I brought her home. And it's never been the same since, to be honest.
Well, now, earlier I spoke to Leslie Chandler. He's a former heroin and crack cocaine user who is now clean and studying at university and volunteers for the drug and alcohol charity Addiction. But first I spoke with Scotland's Minister for Health, Aileen Campbell. I began by asking her what she thinks has led to such a high proportion of deaths caused by drugs in Scotland.
That is down to a number of reasons. There has been historically higher numbers of people in Scotland taking drugs, and now what we're seeing is an ageing cohort of people who have been using drugs for a long time with a number of comorbidities coming through and unfortunately dying prematurely. So that is something that weighs very heavily on me.
The first thing everybody must notice is the need for shelter. And that's one of the things it's difficult to explain in Dundee. It's not a big place. It ought to be possible, surely, to somehow provide shelter for the, well, quite large number of people who find sleeping around in doorways.
Well, absolutely. There is a need for us to work not just within health services, but across different professions, disciplines, to make sure that we have a focus on treating all the complex needs in that person's life. So you could go and treat the addiction, but if you're ignoring the housing element, if you're ignoring the mental health element of that person's needs and requirements, then that would only be treating one part of the problem and you wouldn't be successful. So that is why...
I don't want to be rude, but I mean, but that's your job, isn't it? This isn't new. In 2014, you recorded 21% of the drug deaths in Britain, and yet you only have 8% of the population in Britain. So that means there is something going wrong in Scotland that is particular to Scotland. What is it?
So I said this is an ageing cohort of people who are coming through and have had many years of substance misuse. Now, in part, we can point to a study and research that was done by NHS Health Scotland, which also looked at the economic policies of the 1980s, which led to feelings of hopelessness, people who are less resilient to cope with those economic changes. And it's within that context that we're now starting to see some of that play out with this poor health, different lifestyle choices. So we're trying to deal with a very complicated problem. It won't just be one issue or one simple thing. If it was one simple thing, we would have done it. But this is not an easy issue to deal with. It's going to require us to take innovative and bold approaches, similar to those taken around minimum unit pricing, to cope with the underlying problems, as well as isolation, stigma, social security, austerity that's coming from somewhere else within these aisles, which is not helping.
I take all the points that you've made, but your government has now been in power for more than a decade, and things have not got any better in terms of getting people off the streets and bringing down the death toll.
There are areas we can point to where there has been positive progress that has been as a result of our existing strategy, but we need to do more, and that's why I'm determined through a reviewed and refreshed approach that we will get it right.
Aileen, Campbell, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie.
Hello.
Now, you were an older drug user. What is it that happened 3.5 years ago that stopped something you've been doing all your life?
I was offered, luckily at my age, I was 57 then, I was offered and given another opportunity of going to treatment and a detox. I didn't want to, but once I actually detoxed, my thinking got a little bit clearer. It was a bit of a shock to the system when I looked at my body and what I'd done to it, because I haven't come out of it unscathed. Many overdoses, near-death experiences.
And the amazing thing is you've been able to channel it into going to university.
I am at university at the moment, yeah.
Had you been before?
Well, about 8 years ago, on another opportunity to try and clean my act up, I was clean and I went to a college in Westminster to do my level 2. But I relapsed, and another 7 years of using drugs and almost dying on many occasions. So when I cleaned up this time, I thought, what am I going to do? When I came out of treatment, I thought, what am I going to do in life? Because I had no purpose. My purpose was to get drugs, use drugs, and get more money to keep doing it. That's all I had in life. So it's about purpose in life.
You see, the minister there was talking about this aged cohort, of which you were a member.
Yeah,
not in Scotland, but down here.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if what you've experienced is something that could apply to some of the people we've seen in Dundee.
I think it would apply to them.
But it would require a particularly good detox regime.
I think the lady was saying around that, it's not just about coming off the drugs. It's about housing as well comes into it, belonging somewhere. I grew up in London. I lived in London for 57 years, and I felt I never belonged. I never belonged anywhere. Today,
no
I
family
do.
When you...
It's a long story, but I was fostered, and yeah. But I belong today. That's the difference.
So if you were talking to the authorities in Dundee, what would your advice be to the authorities?
I'm not into politics.
No.
Over the last year or so, I've noticed the cuts where I live, and I understand it's national, and we're trying to deliver a service with less money, with more people, and trying to keep our professional, you know, challenging ourselves and better our service, and it's really challenging.
You endured the stigma of being a drug user for all those years.
Yeah, stigma is a big one today, I think, because, you know, Mr. Average in the street, they see the behaviour of people, like criminality, you know, and they judge people, which is understandable. They don't see the person underneath the behaviour. And for me, I do, because I was that person behaving that way, but it wasn't really me. It was a means to an end to get my drugs, but it's about purpose in life.
And you have a purpose
for me, yeah.
Leslie, thank you very much for coming in.
Okay, thank you, John.